Footy's back for 2026 and so are we. The CODE AFL show this year, we're going to be more dynamic than ever before, especially between the arcs. We need some good two-way running. I've got Lauren Wood and Josh Barnes with me in the studio. Fantastic to have you both here. How have your summers been?
It's been good. It's been busy. Obviously, AFLW runs right through effectively to a week before Christmas by the time we have the draft. So I was busy there. Nice bit of family time in between and then off to the tennis with your great self. So many an ice cream consumed along the way. So it's time to get ourselves in shape, isn't it, for the season proper?
Yeah, we had a great time at the Australian Open. Left Josh in the office holding down the fort, manning the football coverage.
How was the tennis? I was just here by myself for 2 weeks, rocking away, trying to keep pre-season on track, and you two were just eating ice creams.
Yeah.
Well, look, I wouldn't put it that lightly. I mean, the first week, as we know, opening week is brought to you by the Herald Sun. So we love capital O, capital W opening week. The rest of it was just busy, right? Like every time I sort of rolled in, it was absolutely flat stick. They've completely transformed the event. And you'd have to say, I mean, we know footy's in a sphere of its own in this town especially, but there'll be other events that are looking to that as the benchmark now.
In terms of the on-court stuff, there was a bit of talk about, boring tournament, a lot of matches going to straight sets early on, but every match I got assigned was a ripper. Some of them were only 3 or 4 sets, but they were fantastic. So I felt like I got good entertainment value from my matches.
Yeah, you did well. You were sort of that late afternoon type operator at Melbourne Park. As we know, there's no siren on the matches, unlike footy. There's no strict finish time on where things can end up. But it was pretty quiet, wasn't it? I mean, Madison Inglis, arguably the story of the Australians making it through to that 4th round. But until that second Friday with the 2 epics back-to-back, the tennis itself was largely a little bit quiet, but 2 deserving winners, of course.
Yeah, the last weekend was fantastic to cover at the Open. And
good
Josh,
to be on the CODE tennis show. I'm really enjoying it. It's good stuff.
We're going to analyse Daniel Medvedev's early exit later on in the show. But Josh, while we were there covering the tennis, you would have been in charge of all the little State of Origin snippets. The Carlton trainers are going to be running water for the Victorian team. Sam Mitchell and Justin Longmuir are going to be manning the whiteboards. But once we actually got to the spectacle, Bontempelli and Cripps went out for the toss in front of a packed Perth Stadium. It was pretty remarkable. And how do you think it went against expectations?
It was better than I think we could have hoped for, to be honest. I was very sceptical going into it that they wouldn't take it seriously. They'd mess around and it would be all-star level, no defence. There was not a huge amount of defence, but there was enough. And there was players putting their bodies on the line. Zach Butters was fighting. I think he would fight his own mum anyway, but he was fighting. That was good to see. And when WA made a run in that last quarter, got back to 6 points, it felt like a real game. It felt like the crowd was obviously into it. I don't think there could be any more questions about it. It was as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah, I wrote in the predictions, as we know, we love a prediction at Code Sports, that it was the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes that would be really, really telling. And I must admit, I was a bit like you too, Josh. I wrote that with no sort of hope that it would actually occur that way. But I think when we saw the likes of Toby Green, who was absolutely champing at the bit to be out there wearing the big V, guys like Zach Butters, as you say, who was well and truly in the thick of it, with Tom Barrass, no less, for WA. I think it really did come to the fore of how much this meant. I heard Giants coach Adam Kingsley say that Toby was one, he was unnamed initially, but I think we all knew who it was, had tripled the load, the physical load that he was actually supposed to be there. So he'd been sent over to WA with the figures by the Giants fitness team, obviously, if you're allowed to play this much, you're allowed to push yourself to, 70% or whatever it was. But I tell you what, put him in that jumper and there was absolutely no stopping him. So I think it set a really nice bar. I've spoken to a few players over the last few days just at training and one at the coffee shop, funnily enough, and they absolutely loved the entire experience. I know they had their families there as well, which I think only added to it. A lot of them, the kids have buddied up from opposition teams and are sort of asking, I want to go and have a play with George Dangerfield and things like that. So there might be a few park meetups in the middle of the bay from different teams. But I think it added to the goodwill of the event. Obviously, it was about that sort of 3 hours on Saturday night. But as you say, boys, it really couldn't have gone better from an AFL point of view.
How's Toby Green pulling rank on Zach Merritt to get onto the field? I'm not sure if it was his intention to pull Merritt off, but that wouldn't have happened if Merritt was still Essendon captain. Surely you would have told Green to go after Lockie Ash or something to get his starting spot.
Would you try and take on Toby Green? I'm not sure I would. I'd probably say, Toby, whatever you want, you go for it.
That's one of the best parts, I think, in the game is you find out who the real big dogs are. Sam Mitchell and Chris Scott demanded that Patrick Dangerfield start in the middle. I think that was a late change. They wanted him in there to set the tone, I suppose. When Jacob Wiedering came off with the injury, it was Max Holmes who was sort of sent to the back pocket to play there for the whole game. Nobody else really wanted to go down there. You're a younger guy. You worry about that. It's always good to see who sort of pulls rank in those situations and who gets to have their own way.
I did like that they were training during the week. I was starting to get concerned about the training volumes. Like, we don't want them pulling together like an 18-man press or like a Clarko's cluster in the Origin game. But it was unstructured enough that the ball was able to move really freely. Just looking ahead, how soon do you think we'll see the Victorian team again? Because it's clear right now that Western Australia's involvement is going to be pretty important. We need to get South Australia involved at some point as well, and possibly other states. Any ideas for how the format can continue? Do they throw in a second game? Like, what's going to work? Because Victoria seems important from a broadcast perspective, but it's very hard to ignore the atmosphere that was created in WA last week.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be accused, as we are often, of being Vic-centric in saying this, but I think you do need them there. You look at the calibre of players that were in that team. There were stars across every line. So I think, as you say, particularly from a broadcast point of view, I think you do need Victoria there. But looking at the success of it and talking to people who were on the ground who described it as almost like a little bit of a mini gather-round type thing. Everywhere that you walked, you sort of saw people from around the game and fitness staff and media people and families were sort of everywhere. They really lent into the tourism aspect of it too. So I don't see why we couldn't just have, whether it was one game Friday night, one game Saturday night, or whether you would almost do a double header, given that you can lean into that Perth sort of time slot a little bit coming into the eastern states. You know, have a 4-team sort of extravaganza over there, a double header on that Saturday when there's not a lot of other sport on coming in live that weekend. I don't know. I wouldn't mind something like that. You get more players involved. The thing only gets bigger, and then it could become a little bit of, winners then play each other the next year, and then suddenly there's a prize to go with it. So I think it's built a really nice foundation. As you said, we weren't really sure going in how it would be. I think Gary Lyon leading the charge really helped. The coaches obviously really bought in to the theme of it, and Chris Scott particularly from the Victorian point of view. So I don't know, why not?
I like the Lauren Wood State of Origin model. Let's run with that. Josh, would you get around an Allies team, or do you think it needs to be an actual state if we're talking about a 4th team?
I would be very cautious about an Allies team just because you're not playing for anything there. There was clearly enough groundswell for WA to play for WA, and there's history behind that. I mean, we have had Allies teams before, but I don't think it has that history. That's where the 4th team is questionable. I don't know whether we can make that the Indigenous All-Stars team. We saw that last year. We could have that team back again as the 4th side. I don't know whether, like, Queensland is building a lot of young, good players, but is that team strong enough to play against South Australia next year? Who knows? Clearly, the politicians are going to be wrangling about where we play it and when we play it. Peter Malinauskas still is already on the front foot saying he wants to get it in SA. He wants to play it at Adelaide Oval, but WA has all the money at the moment. Does WA have to be in the showpiece game then every year, or are we moving it around the country? I'd also be cautious about expanding too quickly. We've seen that in a lot of sports, expanding things. One thing worked really well, and then let's do it 5 times the next year. I wonder how good it was as a showpiece because it was the actual game, or whether it was so good because it was to have it back. And then next year, we're not having it back. It's just State of Origin again. Do the players still want to play? If it was such a career achievement to play for Victoria, do you want to do it every year, or is it just good to have a Vic jumper in your cupboard one time? That's going to be the questions.
Every second year seems to be the go, doesn't it? And it's run it back, I think is the phrase that every player seemed to use about it. I think you'd have to shrug off the term allies. I think you'd almost have to come up with something new. I'm not sure what that is. I'm sure there's people that have paid a lot more than me to come up with that. But I think the
Academies
AFL
team.
Well, potentially. I'm not sure how that would go down too well at a few clubs in particular, one in Bayside, Melbourne. But AFLW, I think, is another layer to it as well. I think we need some representative footy in the W space. I know they're looking, international rules is the front runner, as we wrote last year on that. But things like that you could just build on top of it and almost make it like another gather round.
Yeah, I think international rules maybe on the wildcard weekend in the men's competition. I think they'd line up with about round 4 or something at the AFLW. If they find a way to put a pause on the season, then they can get that game in. Because I know they were looking at international rules for gather round initially in the women's, but it was a bit too difficult to get the players over. The Irish players didn't necessarily want to be over that early in the year. So maybe that could be a solution.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, gather round, it falls effectively before the AFLW pre-season has ever even properly begun. So you'd be getting players fresh off a long break. As you say, a lot of Irish players aren't even out here yet. But that seems like a prime weekend for it. Have it somewhere like Sydney, where there's a huge sort of expat population as well, who'd get around a Hensard Park type setup. You'd think on the hill with the craft beers and the food trucks, it'd be a great atmosphere.
Either that or a pop-up ground on St Kilda Beach, I reckon, would also go well
sounds good.
for international rules.
Ed, we saw the backlash has started this morning, though. You wrote this story about Adam Kingsley on radio saying is now the best time to host this game because he's been smashed with Sam Taylor out for a very long time. We're all fearful about injuries. Matt Rowe's going to miss the start of the year. Jacob Wiedering's got busted ribs. Does it have to be February or will it move? We were worried injuries would be the issue about State of Origin. Are you going to see a groundswell against it? What's your read?
I think everyone was breathing a sigh of relief when Wiedering was cleared of concussion and anything serious to his. It looked at one point like there might have been a spinal concern when he was out on the field like that. But it's the late news that's come in. Rao with the finger, that's a big blow for Gold Coast early in the season, trying to get some momentum. And now Sam Taylor, when GWS had already had a hard enough week. Adam Kingsley was pretty fair-handed in his discussion around the game. He really enjoyed it. Of course, it was big for Jesse Hogan and Lockie Ash, who claimed the best on ground medals. I think it needs to stay in February. I just can't see it working in the middle of the season. It would liven up those sort of dead rounds in the middle of the year where we kind of get through the buys. People lose interest a little bit when their team isn't playing. But I think in terms of disruptions, it's better to have it at the start of the season than in the middle. And if players are going to crack in like this, you're going to have injuries in the game either way, I would have thought.
Yeah,
it's the risk you take. I mean, we're never going to see it in the middle of the season, I don't think. Yeah. Everyone was on board because of now it is. I mean, Sam Taylor's a lot worse than anyone probably thought, and his road back's going to be...
Worst hamstring awareness I've ever heard of.
A long one, yeah. He was aware. Don't worry. He was very aware. So it's incredibly unfortunate. And it was going to happen to someone, wasn't it? And it was unfortunate that it has happened to GWS, as you say, that it had already had those hammer blows in the days that were prior. We didn't know about Finn Callaghan either until earlier this week, so that was just another layer to it. So, I mean, the way Jason McCartney, the head of footy up there, put it was Kingsley had been wondering what he'd done. You know, like had he walked under a ladder at some point? Has he smashed a mirror? But as we know in footy, these things sometimes just happen. And it's unfortunate. They would have been playing match play anyway on the weekend, as Tom Green was the day beforehand. So I think it's just the risk that coaches take, isn't it, when they send players over there to play it?
The only way it could work in mid-season is if they had a genuine bye and took a week off the season and played it then. But then again, the star players are not getting a bye in the season if you do that. I think Geelong people still shake their head a little bit about 2008 when they had that Dream Team game. They had about 8 players in that. They ran out of gas in that grand final. You can't blame it on that, but it was a small little annoyance they had. So I don't think you're going to have it then because your star players are playing through the whole year and don't get a single break.
Yeah, Stuart Dew didn't play in that Dream Team game.
Yeah, no.
It's pretty handy in that third quarter. Lauren, speaking of Hawthorn and Geelong, you've been out at Dingley for the first of the match-ins. We've got a few trips coming up. I'm going to Whitten Oval tomorrow. Josh, you're off to Casey on Friday.
Casey,
but Lauren, how was Dingley and how was the clash between the Hawks and Geelong?
Well, it was hot. It was 35-odd degrees on Monday, so we were in the thick of it, 1:45 start. Obviously, both teams had a lot of Origin players that were in action on the Saturday, so they were up in the air-conditioned boxes watching on, so you didn't have the likes of Jack Gunston, Josh Battle, obviously Patrick Dangerfield, Max Holmes, Jeremy Cameron's been injured. So a lot of them were there watching on, but it was certainly a younger outfit for both of the teams. The first real competitive hit-out that we've seen out at Dingley, so it was good to give the venue a little bit of a run as well. They even invited some past players back for a bit of a function, so certainly match sims aren't what they used to be when there'd be, 25 people and a few media along. It was well and truly practice match areas for a work day and a school day. There seemed to be a lot of people who were maybe working from home out from Dingley. But it was a great showing, and I think particularly from a Hawthorn point of view, maybe an eye to what we're going to see during the season. Obviously, the Will Day injury has been a big one for the Hawks, so we got a little bit of a look at what they're potentially going to do with their midfield setup, of course, led by John Newcomb. We had Josh Weddle in there. Josh Ward played really, really well, particularly in the third quarter. And Nick Watson attending a few centre bounces as well. So he's obviously adding more strings to his bow, kicked a couple up forward as well. So he was moving thereabouts. Lloyd Meek and Ned Reeves were a pretty even split as well in the rucking sense. So you would have to think that that's something that they're looking at doing with that role. We weren't too sure how they were going to go with that. But, of course, the SSP spot is the watch for clubs like Hawthorn at the moment. So Flynn Perez and Jack Riding were both in action out there on Monday. And Perez in particular was really eye-catching off that half-back line and then managed to boot a goal from 55 odd metres.
Super goal.
Out. It was absolute super goal areas. So both of them really staked their claim really, really well. Obviously, the deadline's approaching for that, but the battle's well and truly on out there. From a Geelong perspective, Jay Polkinghorne kicked 4 goals, so he was looking really good. Henry as well was in really good form too. So we'll get a bit more of a look, obviously, at the 2 teams and all of the teams in their proper, and I use that term loosely, practice matches next week as part of the Amy Community Series. But it was an interesting look both at the facility where they want to play W games from as soon as this year, but also the teams from a setup point of view. Jack Ginnivan too was pretty eye-catching with the new bleached blonde hair. He was in the thick of it in the coach's box, no less. So it's obviously something that he wants to pursue after he's finished playing. Got a little bit of a different perspective on it.
And how's your perspective on Dingley, the venue? Because there was some interesting scenes with the driveway melting at the end of the game.
There were. Well, Dingley as a venue suits me very nicely because I live Bayside, so it's almost a home game for me. So I'm more than happy than some other staff members we have here who potentially live on the north side of town and don't want to trek all the way out there. So it worked beautifully from a logistics point of view. But in terms of hosting games, it was the real first test of it. It was the first time I'd been put under any strain. As I say, 700 odd cars filled the car park. Very, very hot conditions, as you say, that melted the driveway as we were leaving. So
what the tar was going all
yeah,
across
well,
the
so
road.
you could see it. I mean, I walked out with Michael Klein, our photographer here at CODE, and I said, "Oh, the ground's wet," before I even really thought about it. And he said, "No, can't you smell it? It was well and truly melting." And then, of course, as all the cars drove on it, it was almost crumbling away as we went.
Dear.
So you could really hear it on your cars. So it'd be really interesting to see what they do with that because, as I say, it was the first real test, and unfortunately the driveway didn't stand up to it. So
How are your tyres?
I don't know. I'm not going to check, actually. So now that we've talked about it, it's reminded me now, 2 days later, that maybe I need to go back and have a look at the undercarriage of my Holden. But it's an incredibly flashy setup that they've got out at the Kennedy Community Centre. Obviously, they've got 2 ovals, Marvel and the MCG, effectively. Don't mention the wind, I believe, is the phrase that they're uttering out there. It is very, very windy. That is something that they're contending with and looking at how they can, I guess, combat that a little bit, but largely very impressive.
I was out there for an open training the week before Christmas. I think it was actually called Hawthorn's Dingley Christmas or something like that. Santa was there. There was a band playing Christmas carols. It was actually about 8 degrees. It was raining sideways.
Oh, no.
It's a completely different climate out there. It's like they've managed to find the equivalent of Waverley Park out on the south side as well. It's just different weather to everywhere else in Melbourne. Very exposed, and they're going to need to work out a way of sheltering the AFLW ground if they try to play there because it's even windier than Frankston would be.
Well, that's exactly right. They've been playing at Frankston the last few years, and that's been the argument put to me by different people over the last few weeks is, oh, well, we play at Frankston. What's the difference? Well, my argument, and I've had this with the AFL, is maybe you shouldn't be playing at Frankston either. Maybe particularly for the women's game, as it continues to develop skill-wise, you're playing with a lighter ball as well. So let's play with a lighter ball at really windy venues. What do you think's going to happen? The ball's going to fly everywhere. So all of these things don't really add up. And I know the AFL has been looking at things like wind over the last couple of years as they look at sort of the metrics around the game. But it is something that they're going to have to look at. I know they've been training a lot on the pavilion ground, for want of a better term, out at Dingley too, because it is just that little bit more protected. But I am told that inside the 4 walls, to use a footy terminology, it's not to be spoken about, the wind.
Outside of the 4 walls, I had one person from a different club say that they'd heard rumours that they couldn't shut the doors. It was so windy. So it is being spoken out of outside the 4 walls. It is super exposed out there, particularly that MCG-sized oval is just out. There's nothing around it at all. They're going to have to plant some trees or build a wall or something because, like you, Ed, I went out to training a few weeks ago and they were kicking the ball up and it was just flying across the screen. It was so windy and it makes it really hard to train. And strangely, they've gone from Waverley Park, which is known as horrible weather, but that's probably one of the most enclosed training grounds of any in the AFL just because there are apartments right on the boundary line there. So now they've got nothing at all. So it's a completely different atmosphere for the players. I don't know if it will affect them at all during the season, but it means that they're missing a lot of targets at training at the moment.
No, we know what'll happen. You never know if it'll be mentioned, but if you're 2-8, it'll be mentioned. Don't you worry. It'll be all about the new facility.
We'll be mentioning it.
Oh yes.
This is probably my favourite week of pre-season, just with the chaos of the unorganised, the unofficial match sims. There's no stats. We've got to do the stats ourselves if we want them. The clubs sometimes invent little rules during the matches. It all looks pretty uniform in terms of what the clubs have disclosed. Has anything caught your eye, Josh, out of these match sim matchups?
No, nothing has jumped out so far. I mean, I was at a Collingwood North Melbourne game a couple of years ago where they just paused it halfway through the third quarter, didn't tell us in the media or filming it on KO anything, and then suddenly players were running everywhere and the scoreboard had changed that Collingwood was up by 10 points and they're playing scenarios. So that can just pop up out of anywhere. So I think we might see a little bit of that, but who knows? It's been pretty standard so far. It was interesting. I noted that Geelong has a little bit of a longer injury list, but they had 27 players to Hawthorn's 30 in their team list in the first game. So I think we'll see a fair bit of change and difference as the teams progress.
Tanner Bruin, I forgot to mention too, he was a late out due to illness. So obviously plenty of people were looking forward to seeing him in his first competitive hit out in more than a year. So we've got to wait another week for that. But they are getting a bit gentrified, the old match sims, aren't they? I remember going to one a couple of years ago when, how do you spend your maternity leave? By going to practice matches. Isn't that a bit sad when I say it out loud? But it went to one Richmond and Melbourne, I think it was, out at Casey. The old 6 quarters used to get a run at this time of year, but no, they're straightening up well and truly. It's a bit boring, isn't it?
The 6 quarters is fantastic if you're a VFL top-up player. It's quite difficult for anyone trying to make sense of what's going on out there. Luke Beveridge was doing a bit of a half-half thing with the Bulldogs VFL and AFL squads in a 6-quarter last year. One thing to look out for North and Demons fans, it's the same matchup as last year. They've carved out a bit of time for scenario training. They're going to have 3 minutes at half-time and at the end of the game. I think they'll do something similar to last year. They put a team up by 8 points. The other team's chasing. Last year it was deadlock. Neither side was able to chase down the other. So that's one to look out for. We'll finish off with some quick hands. One of our segments making its return in 2026. The other segments haven't returned yet, but we'll work on that. What one player from you both that not many people have heard of who could actually tear it up this season? And we got to get the calls in early before they do something in the match sim games. I might start with you, Josh. Have you got anyone in mind who fits that bill?
NRT for me, Noah Roberts-Thompson, kicked 3 goals in a Richmond match sim I was at before the Oz Open while you guys were preparing for your tennis. Very, very smart around goals. One of those players that just popped up in the pocket and I said, who's that? And then 5 minutes later, he popped up and took a mark. Who's that? He just kept doing it. So he's a player that I don't think will play very early, but I think maybe halfway through the year he'll definitely get a Guernsey and knows his way around goals. So that's a random name for you, Ed.
NRT, great.
Well, without notice here, I want it noted here. So I've obviously got Hawthorn and Geelong on the brain after being out there Monday. I mean, I spoke about Flynn Perez earlier. I don't know if I can pump him up anymore, but if he does gain that SSP spot, I think he's got all the attributes to really have an impact straight away. He's got the big body. As you said, we saw him do it at both ends of the ground last week, so whether he can do it. Another one, he's a name that we know, but I know at Geelong, Jai Clark is one that they're really hoping can take the next step this year and I guess have a little bit more of an impact. So sticking with my Hawks and Cats theme for now, but give me some notice next time and I'll bring 3 names for you.
They've been big on Mitch Edwards for a couple of years there.
Yeah.
It's good to see him out there in the match. I mean, he moves really well for a massive man, so I think he might get some time this year, given Reece Stanley's injured now. Toby Conway's perennially injured, so there's definitely recommends there. Blitzars is injured right now as well, so they're running out of soldiers.
Let the record show this segment was on the bottom of the run sheet, Lauren, and I've got a prepared answer that I think people on the eastern seaboard wouldn't be too familiar, but it's actually a former Dandenong Stingrays captain, Cooper Simpson at Fremantle. 3 games last year, 2 really impressive games as a high half back.
And made his way in my Supercoach team at that point too.
Excellent.
And then it all just fell apart.
To Supercoach. And
What happened to him?
He was looking like the value, the rookie that would bump, wouldn't he? Wasn't he? And then he did his AC joint really early in a game against Port Adelaide, his 3rd game. So he got back at the end of the season, played a bit of waffle, but obviously Fremantle were in their finals campaign. I think he's someone who could potentially really benefit from that 5th spot on the bench, even though they brought over Jugd McVee. I reckon there's a role there for him. So look out for him at Fremantle.
And look out for me doing my homework, reading the run sheet.
Fantastic to have you with us on the first episode of the CODE AFL show for 2026. We'll be back with more next week. Hope everyone's getting excited for Match Sims. You can follow along all our coverage of the pre-season matches on the CODE Sports and Herald Sun websites.